Yeah, man, from the islands. Jason in a paradise. Check it. I wake up in the morning, palm tree them a sway. Tablet in my hand, thousands of comics today. DC Universe, Infinite, Marvel Unlimited. Two superhero stories for me read all day through. No need for drive a comic shop, no worry about the rate. Paradise and panels, pleasure without pay. Monthly subscription, value that me love. Reading by the ocean, blessings from above. Pick up on my tablet, heroes come alive. Chasing in Hawaii, feel the island vibe. Thousands of adventures right there in me hand. Reading in a paradise, greatest life so grand. DC and Manda, how the stories flow. Anywhere me wander, comics always go. Subscription worth it every single day. Island breeze a blow and I read away. Batman to the beach, Spider-Man to the shore. Swipe on top, me reading more and more. No heavy boxes, no storage space required. All the issues that me wanted, everything me desired. Sun on my shoulders, tablet screen so bright. Wonder Woman, help them. Heroes give me like convenience blessed. Technology and tradition meet. Jason living good, life complete and sweet. Digital palm and tablet, heroes come alive. Chasing a Hawaii, feel the island vibe. Thousands of adventures right in a me hand. Reading in a paradise, greatest life so grand. DC and Manda, how the stories flow. Anywhere we wander, comics always go. Subscription worth it every single day. Island breeze a blow and we read away. From Gotham to Asgard, Metropolis to Wakanda too. All them words accessible, nothing me can't view. Monthly payment small for what me get in return. Paradise and passion, lesson that me learn. Yeah, yeah. Just give thanks, digital blessings, and a tropical lands. Read on island style. Paradise did.
Aloha! It's Jason from Hawaii. Welcome to another special edition of the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast. Now, in this episode, I will be talking about the Marvel Unlimited and the DC Infinite Ultra digital comics app. Now, I'll be basically talking about my personal opinions, the pros and cons about each app, and how I use each app to complement my love for reading comics. Now, again, just a reminder, these are just my opinions about Marvel Unlimited and the DC Infinite Ultra apps. Now, spoiler alert, overall, I love both apps, but each of these apps, like I said, there's pros and cons to it, and I'm just going to go over in this episode. Now, note, please, during this episode, I'll be, if I talk about the apps, sometimes I'll just say Marvel Unlimited app. But for the DC Infinite Ultra app, sometimes I'll just shorten it to DC Ultra, and I just basically mean DC Infinite Ultra app. So just a little minor thing. So let's just keep moving on. I have been a long-time subscriber to Marvel Unlimited for a few years now. Now, it started with a promotion, a promotion at that time, and I forgot it was like, I think it was like X amount of dollars for an annual. It was like a annual fee for, I forgot how much, I forgot what it was. So I decided to join it up, and after that year was up, I just continued my subscription. Now, over the years, I would pop into the Marvel Unlimited app once in a while, and I still bought, a large number of Marvel issues from my LCS. Now, I'm just going to go a little bit political just for a minute. Now, when I heard talks about tariffs, and to add on top of that, the rise of home insurance over the past couple years, and I also knew that, prices of items were going to go up, no matter what. So already I was planning, I started to plan for things already. So, you know, so yeah, so I just started to plan for things. So I start to like scale back on um buying a lot of monthly comics from my LCS. So, and also too, the other thing also too, I noticed within the last year in 2024, there are like certain Marvel and DC comics, their cover prices were already going up. So it was kind of already, maybe it was already start, there was some of the writings on the wall of, that the prices of comics was already going to be increased already. So as I already mentioned before that, I decided to, this year, 2025, I decided to cut way back on my comic book spending. So you know, now since I have Marvel Unlimited and I finally was able to get the DC Infinite Ultra app a couple years ago, so since I got those two apps, I really scaled back on buying a lot of monthly comics from Marvel and DC. Now, when I first subscribed to Marvel Unlimited, a few years ago, I was hesitant about reading comics digitally. I was still the traditionalist who only wanted to read hard copies every month and go to my comic book shop every week and so forth and so forth. But over time, you know, I love reading comics and I love it reading both digitally and hard copies because the bottom line is that I just want to be entertained. I just want to take a break from reality. Now, you know, as I mentioned, I still pick up some monthly titles from DC and Marvel. I did scale back a lot. So I still pick up monthly comics, but I'm very selective on what Marvel and DC comics I picked up. And I stick to and literally this time I really stick to a tight pull list. Now, the reason is I still love going to my comic shop. I still love reading physical comics. You know, and I'm also a collector too. Like for example, when Absolute Batman #1 came out, I know I could read it on the DC Infinite Ultra app, but but I picked it up as a spec pick because I'm still a little bit of a collector. And also, too, I picked up and on the Marvel side, I picked up two copies of the miniseries Wolverine versus Predator because, I still wanted a physical copy to read because some of the art in there was gorgeous. And also too as a spec pick too, because I'm gonna say who knows, 20 years from now, there might be a Wolverine versus Predator movie. Who knows? And then I'm gonna go, look, I still have my first issue of that. So, that's a great spec pick I got. So, so I still, like I said, I still pick up some comic, I'm very selective. And also too, I also pick up some Spawn related comics because, you know, I don't think I yeah, I don't think Image has anything similar to the Marvel Unlimited or the DC Infinite Ultra app. So now um I'm going to start talking just some of the little differences between Marvel Unlimited and DC Infinite, the DC Infinite apps. So excuse me for a moment while I take a sip of water. Now, for Marvel Unlimited, I got this off their website. It says, that you have access to 30,000 comics anytime, anywhere on iPhone, iPad, Android, and on the web. New comics are available 3 months after it hits the shelf. And, you get original and also too, what I love about the Marvel Unlimited too is that you get original content from their Infinity comics, like such as I think there's like there sometimes they'll have new stories, new Avengers stories that's not in print, and it's just only exclusive on the Marvel Unlimited. So I think that's pretty cool. Now there are three, I guess, pay tiers. If you want to subscribe to Marvel Unlimited, you have the regular monthly $9.99. You have the annual, which is $69, and also too you have the annual plus, which is $99. Now that one is you get an exclusive membership, you get some other little perks too. And I think they change it every year, but you get a limited edition Marvel Legends figures that's not available anywhere else. Also too on the annual plus, you're you know you're in you have invites and access to Marvel events, 10% off Marvel merchandise, plus more at the Disney Store website. Now, you know, so like I said, there are three different types of pay tiers. You know, um, for me, the pro for this, the pro for, getting the app is that I think for a few, I think one of the good things about Marvel Unlimited is sometimes, and this is a pro, I think every few months that they will use like some promotion, like to promote to try to get new readers onto Marvel Unlimited, and they'll use some promo codes like something like, get a 3-month trial for X amount of dollars. And again, that's how they hooked me in a few years ago. Actually, mine was, if I remember correctly, I think mine was like, I think the annual fee was like cut in half if I joined up. So, so if you guys are interested, if you want to wait, try to see if there's a Marvel Unlimited promo app promotion code that comes up. Just wait for that and then just check out the app from there. Now, for me, I I pay the regular annual subscription of $69. Now, and I can't remember. I think taxes are included in certain areas, something like that. So, but I think that's a reasonable price, for an annual fee. Now, the DC Infinite, now they have three paid tiers. Now, the first one is free, but you only can read a rotating selection of free comics that they put up. And also, you get to read the latest episodes of DC Go. Now, that is kind of like, their format is it's formatted to selected monthly titles such as Absolute Batman in a scrolling format. And I think they do have some original content, such as, just recently they had the Flash and Fantastic Four crossover. The DC Go kind of sort of like almost sounds like a Marvel limited Infinity Comics exclusive. That's what it sounds like to me. Now, that's the first tier. Now, the first tier is the free one. And then on the second tier is the standard. It's $7.99 per month, um, $74.99 annual fee. You get a 7-day free trial period. You have 20, you're at your fingertips. You have 27,000 plus comics and graphic novels, and new comics are available 6 months after print release. Now, the top tier is their ultra tier. That's $12.99 per month or $119 annual. So and that you get, the 7-day free trial period. You have access to over 34,000 plus comics and graphic novels. Not the other good thing I love about the Ultra tier is new comics available 30 days after print release. That was the one I love. And also too, this is the other thing I love about the DC Infinite Ultra is expanded catalog of Vertigo, Black Label, and collected editions. And that's pretty cool. That's why I chose I picked the DC Infinite Ultra and I'm paying the annual subscription. Now the con for the DC Infinite one is that, if I remember correctly, don't think they have I don't think they have too many promo codes or promo options for people to have new readers to jump on. So, but I could be wrong. Because yeah, it's like because what I noticed, I think Marvel Unlimited, at least they have like at least maybe 2 or 3 times a year. But I think the DC Internet app, I really hardly see one throughout the year. So yeah. Now, the pros for having both apps, they have new releases that come out every week. Again, Marvel has theirs where it comes out, you know, um, 3 months after it hits the shelf. And also too in the DC Infinite, depends on what tier that you pick. If you just pick the middle tier, the DC Infinite, that comes out. The release date is like 6 months after the book is out in stores. Or if you get the DC Infinite Ultra, it comes out basically 30 days after, after print release. So the other thing, but it's kind of nice and exciting too, because like I said, I love it because they have like quote unquote new releases, even though it's a little old, but you know, no, whether and like I said, you know, whether it's a month delay or 3 months or 6 months, it's available on the app and I can read it anytime I want. That's the thing I love about it. The other thing too is that um now Marvel, their weekly releases is on Sunday, the bulk of it. Now it's like whatever, whatever new releases were that came out 3 months ago, or if they could add on you know, like some of their old back stocks, like if they finally can like release some of the, I'm just pulling something out, like some of the issues from the Midnight Sun series back in the 90s. That's pretty good. They'll release it on that Sunday too. That's where they release most of it. And also on Thursdays, I think most of it, um the Thursday releases are mostly like the Infinity Comics, like whatever news Avengers storyline or Jeff the Landshark, etc. And now I know DC does a weekly release and it's on every Wednesday, and that's pretty cool because it's just that I think is cool because Wednesdays comics book come out. That's the day we hit the comic shops, and also it's so cool that they have it that they have that DC releases their digital comics on a Wednesday. That's really cool. That's what I love about that. So excuse me one moment. Now, the other thing I love about both apps is the pros is saving money. Now, for example, on the DC Internet Ultra app, or they have Supergirl by Sophie Campbell. Now, I've mentioned this before in the past, that I passed on this series when it first came out. Now, I know, of course, Drew spoke highly of it on a previous Comics for Fun and Profit episode, and after he spoke about it, I decided to check it out on the DC app. And And I'm glad I did because it's a great read. Now, again, due to budgetary and also spatial reasons too, I can't pick up a hard copy, of all the comics that come out of DC and Marvel, but at least I can read it on the app. So, so at least it scratches that need to read comics and also still keep up, on the new stuff to see what interesting storylines they're coming up with. And like I mentioned too, the pros is that, as I mentioned that, not only does these both apps help me save money, it also gives me an opportunity to try things, without any, monetary risk. Like Justice League Red, issue number one. I saw it on the stands. I was curious, but again, I need to stick to my budget. I didn't want to pay $4 for it because what if it was an issue that I didn't like? Then it's like I'm stuck with issue number one and so forth. So that's why I love getting both apps. Um, Also too, what's really nice is, you know, um, what's really nice is I'm able to save money, some money each month. So whatever money I don't, my monthly budget, whatever money I don't spend on buying comics, I can save that money to attend, local comic book conventions. So hopefully, local comic book convention comes back next year. That way, when I save up enough money, it helps me buy my admission ticket, um, helps me pay for some of the autograph signatures. And if I budget wisely, I may be able to pay for a head sketch on a blank variant cover. And that's pretty cool because oh shoot, I'm just trying to think who was it? It was artist Tom Riley or Riley, but I forget which artist that came to Comic-Con Honolulu. And he was charging, I think a head sketch was for, I could be wrong, I think for at least $100, but I had saved up enough money, so I had $100 to spare, so I could do that. And it's pretty cool. It's really great. So yeah, so that's one of the pros I like about, you know, um, getting both of these apps is not only to it helps me save money and put it somewhere else where I may be able to go to the conventions and at least still have some fun doing that. Also, too, the other pro thing about having both apps, is comic book recommendations. Now, I think these apps are great for, if someone recommends a series to me to check out, I can just do it on the app. Like, for example, I'm going to give a shout out to Drew. He loved the, DC's Scooby Apocalypse. It's available on the DC Ultra, and I can check out the whole series on the app. So I think that's pretty cool. And also, too, you know, if I miss certain creative teams' runs on a series, such as writer Stuart Moore, he did 19 issue run of the New 52 Firestorm. I can go back on the app and check that out instead of trying to hunt back those issues or try to look for the trades or whatever or to see if they're that's the other thing to see if they're still in print. I can just open it on the app too. Just open it and read it on the app. Now the pro for both apps, excuse me for a minute, you know, saving money on some of these big events. Now, in the 80s, I love big crossover events. I'm sorry, let me repeat that. I love those big crossover events back in the 80s. But since then, it's like every now it's like it was like again, it was every year some big events, major huge event. Worlds would live, worlds would die. Marvel Universe will never be the same. Blah 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 blah. And now it seems like you know, Marvel and DC almost seems it seems like it's either every 6 months or so that there's a huge major event and blah 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 blah, and it's gonna change, the comic book universe for blah 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 blah. You know, so but now, like, and also to the other thing I also noticed too is that, these events last 6 to 9 months and they have tie-ins, whether it's crossing over to monthly series or, they have these 3 issue a monthly mini series that, that's tied into the event, and these things can get very expensive. For example, right now on the Marvel Unlimited, I'm reading Star Wars the Dark Droids event. Now, I looked up how many issues this was and I saw how long it ran. This event lasted 5 months, crossed over into main monthly Star Wars series, such as Star Wars, Dr. Aphra, Darth Vader, Bounty Hunters, and had 2 tie-in miniseries. Now, total, it's about 29 books. And let's look. So I kind of figured it out. I was thinking like $3.99 a book, and the estimate total of this event, if I had bought the hard copies, would have been $116. Now, just recently, I visited a local comic shop, Other Realms, and they were selling the set for, $80. Now, the thing is, again, I'm paying Marvel Unlimited about $69, $70. You know, you know, again, the pros for both apps, the pros for getting both apps, it's saving me money, on some of the big events. Now, again, for me, it depends too. It's like if it's an event that I like or I hear is very good and stuff, I'll choose to budget to get that event. But if not, I'll just usually sit it out and just wait for it to come on Marvel Unlimited or DC Ultra. And then that way I can save money too. Now, you know, the other thing is since, I have both apps, I can, again, like I said, I can read the events on the app. Now, the downside for both of these apps is for some of these big events, it doesn't link you to the next part of the story. Again, for example, I spoke about Star Wars Dark Droids. It was a Star Wars Marvel event. So, for example, like, part of like Dr. Aphra number 36. It was part of the main event. I would read that issue, but it didn't connect me to the next chapter of the Dark Droids. which would be Bounty Hunters number 39. And it's the same for the DC app too as well. So that's kind of a downside to that. Some of these big events, they don't, link the chapters to the event, you know, you know, succinctly or whatever. So, but on the pro side of both apps, for some of the DC Marvel event apps, such as Blood Hunt, now under under the event reading guides, it is easily set up where, after you read a chapter, it connects you to the next chapter in the event. So let's say if it's Blood Hunt number one, you read that, and let's say it's Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 23 or something. It jumps to that issue. And then after Spider-Man 23, it jumps to whatever. And so that's really nice that it does that. Now, in the DC Ultra app, now if the event has an omnibus or a trade link, when you click onto the storyline, it connects you to the next chapter of the event, such as, let's see, um, back in the 90s, Batman had, several major events. One of them was Batman Contagion. So that, I believe, in the DC Ultra app, I think it had either like it was either the omnibus or the trade. So you can click onto that link, and it'll, you know it links you up to all, the whole storyline of the Contagion. It runs from Batman, Detective Comics, Robin, Catwoman. So so it kind of goes in that order, and that's pretty cool. And I'll be honest with you, that is something that I just basically found out today. So I just think that's pretty cool. Now, again, no, not every event is set up that way in the DC Marvel app. And and the downside is sometimes it's a hassle trying to look for what the next issue to read or the chapter in the event. But if you think about it, in some sense, it's a little fun because then you got to create your own list, and then you got to track down digital comics. It's almost kind of like you know um going into the dollar bins, trying to go, oh, I have this issue for this event. I gotta go look through and you know, just think of it that's kind of fun to do. That's a little bit of fun to do. So now a con side for both apps is that, for both apps, they may not have everything on their app. For example, DC does not have any of the back issues of Sergeant Rock or any of the other like war comics such as like GI Combat, The Unknown Soldier, and I think it was just recent, this past October, you know, DC Ultra finally digitally released some of the old horror classics such as The Witching Hour. So that was pretty cool to look up to read some of those old stories. Now, and for Marvel, I think, for some of the series, they're either missing an issue or a chunk of issues during a specific run. Like, I think, for example, like the Defenders from the 1970s, and I think it ran to the mid 80s. Like, I think, not all the Defender issues are up on the Marvel Unlimited app, you know. And here's a very good example too. Like, for example, I picked up a couple of annuals, in the dollar bins that were part of the Terminus Factory event. Now, this was a five-part event, and if I remember correctly, some of the Marvel events in the 90s were done in the annuals. Now, part three of the Terminus Factor, Thor Annual 15, was not available on the app. Now, to me, that was kind of a little bit of a bummer because, it was a little bit of a bummer because it's kind of like, oh shoot, you got like, part one and part two on your on Marvel Unlimited. I got part four and five, um, from the dollar bins, but you guys don't have the Thor annual, so it's a little bit of a bummer. But you know what? I'm not gonna let that stop me from reading this event. Now, even though you know both apps, they don't have these back issues, you know, it doesn't mean that they're not gonna add it at some future date. Because who knows, maybe next year, I don't know, let's say on Veterans Day of next year, they're able to finally release, some of the war comics like Sergeant Rock, GI Combat, you know, um, you know, onto the app. And that'd be pretty cool. So yeah, so even though they don't have it right now, doesn't mean they're not going to add it in the future. Now, the con for the Marvel Unlimited. Now, there is no pay tier where I can, read Marvel Max or those Red Band stories. So, you know, yeah, that's it. It's just so it's either so if I want to read a Marvel Max Punisher Marvel Max, it was either I'd have to go through Comixology or I'd have to track down omnibuses or trade paperbacks or the Red Band stories, such as like when Blood Hunt had two versions, like the quote unquote the newsstand version or the Red Band bag, Blood Hunt. So what I had to do with that one was basically I went to in-stock trades and I just picked up the hardcover of the Red Band Blood Hunt hardcover edition. But it would have been nice that if Marvel Unlimited had that, and I would pay a little bit more to read those issues because that would be pretty cool. Now, for DC Infinite Ultra, the pro side is that they do include the vertical and black label titles. So that's pretty cool. And again, that's why I picked up, that's why I'm subscribing annually to the DC Infinite Ultra because not only do I can, read comics, a month later, I can also, read through, the vertical black label series. So yes, I think that's a pretty good for the DC Infinite Ultra. Now the pros for both apps. Now both apps complement my dollar bin finds. Now I know I just said both apps may not have everything, but sometimes I get the best of both worlds. Now in previous Comics for Fun and Profit episodes, I spoke about, how I love to dive into dollar bins and I talk about what I picked up and stuff like that. Now, and I did mention I did come across Immortal Thor, um, you know, a whole bunch of Thor titles from issues 12 to 25. Now, they're sitting all together in the dollar bin, which is pretty great. But issue 20, I couldn't find issue 22. Issue 22 is missing. Now, what I can do is I can read the floppies from issues 12 to 21, go to the Marvel Unlimited app and read issue 22, and then go back and finish reading the rest of the floppies. I just think that's so awesome. That is so cool. Also, too, um, I love picking up annuals or specials from the dollar bins. For example, I picked up DC Armageddon 2001 issue number 2. I remember it's funny because all I remember seeing is a lot of these issue number twos in the bins. I have never seen issue number 1. So since I have the DC Ultra, hey, I can read DC Armageddon 2001 issue number 1 on the app and then read the hard copy and read issue number 2, right after that, as a hard copy. So I think that's pretty cool. Now, the pros for both apps, you get original content exclusive to each app. Like Marvel has the Infinity Comic series, such as Jeff the Landshark. Yeah, that's a fun read. It is. Or like new Avengers stories or new Fantastic Four stories. And the format is basically it's the scrolling, you scroll it, from up to down, and it's really good. And also too on the DC Ultra, sometimes, they have some original content, such as Legends of the Dark Knight, Six Fingers, written and drawn by Dan um, Brenton. You know, that was originally that was supposed to have gone to print, but they moved it to the DC app. So, and it's great. It's beautiful when you look, you read it on the app. It's very well drawn. So, all right. And finally, the pros for both apps. Nostalgia. Now, while growing up in Hawaii in the 70s, I used to get, my comics from, either magazine shops or sundries. And I used to love, reading these dollar size, detective comics or adventure comics, as a kid because, I got my money's worth. I forget if they were like 80, but they were thick. I think they would have like 5 or 6 stories. I think like be, you know, 10 pages each or something like that. So it was pretty awesome. Now, as an adult, I do miss reading some of those issues. And I thank God, and I thank God that DC Ultra has some of these issues on the app, and I get to revisit them again. And again, it's fun to read. It kind of brings me back to my childhood, and I love it. I wish that they could, like I know GI Combat had some of their dollar size issues, and I want to say House of Mystery, one of the horror comics, I forget. But those are great fun reads. They were. Now, as I mentioned that for both apps, it's for nostalgia purposes. The I want to give a very special shout out to Chelsea Daniels. Now, we follow each other on Blue Sky. Now, she was posting some pages from the Super Friend comic book series from DC. And the thing is, while doing some, I was trying to do some quote unquote research for this episode. I found out that the DC Super Friends is available on the DC Ultra app. So, you know, thank you very much, Chelsea, for posting, those panels of the Super Friends. Now I can read those issues. And, again, that's from my childhood. And those are great and fun stories. Now, on the Marvel Unlimited side, as a kid, I used to see ads for Giant Size Spider-Man #1. Now, this is where Spidey versus Dracula, and I wanted to read this issue, as a kid growing up in the 70s in Hawaii, we didn't have, an exclusive local comic shop, so you know, we either bought it from a pharmacy, from stores, etc. So I missed out on this. Now, as an adult, now instead of me hunting down for that issue and paying X amount of dollars just to read it, and then great, I spent $10 and I read my comic, and what am I going to do to it now? You know, I could just go to the Marvel Unlimited app, read it, and that's it. I was able to scratch that itch, and that was a great issue. That was a fun issue, I have to say that. Now, overall, Marvel Unlimited and DC Infinite Ultra. Now, they are not perfect apps. Now, each of them, has their own pros and cons, but overall, I love both apps. Why? Because I love reading comics. It doesn't matter if these are comics from when I was growing up or even before that, like in the 60s or something like that. Or, or um if it's comics that are, you know, the latest issues that are being released today. I just love reading comics. I just want to be entertained, you know, and you know, and again, like I said, I have the best of both worlds. I have, the both of the apps so I could read, whatever I don't pick up from my comic shop, I can read it on the app. Whatever monthly issues I pick up from my comic shop, I can read those. So again, it's the best of both worlds. Now, those are my thoughts about these two apps. Again, these are my opinions, you know, um, so again, like I said, I just really love these apps. And I think overall, financially, they're it's really good. I think they're worth the money, especially for the annual cost. So, and I really think it's very good. Now, if you love picking up monthly floppies, that's fine. That's no problem. That's okay. But I hope I gave you some information that may be helpful, to pass on to another comic book fan who may be financially struggling and still want to read comics, but again, comics are getting a little expensive. Things are getting a little expensive. So it's like just trying to find out where can people save money. So one possibility is maybe, getting the Marvel Unlimited app, getting the DC Infinite app. That's one, you know, those are some options. Now, if you are considering cutting back on buying comics, again, because of financial reasons, or let's put it this way, even space, let's put it this way, even space, to store them, you know, um, you know, um, I hope, some of my thoughts on the apps help you consider subscribing to one or both apps. So yeah, I just want to say, just thank you very much for listening to my opinions. Thank you very much. Remember, read what you love, and who cares what anyone thinks. So yeah, so um, I'm gonna say that's it for this episode. And as always, you know, I always want to thank Drew, the Codes of Comics for Fun and Profit, for letting me contribute to his podcast. And Drew, thank you very much for all your hard work behind the scenes. Thank you very much, Drew. And I want to thank you, listener. Thank you for, sticking with me through this episode, through my mistakes, through me taking sips of water. You know, um, just thank you for listening. Thank you very much. And, if you are a new listener to the Comics for Fun and Profit podcast, new episodes come out every Saturday. So please check out, Kyle and Drew's episodes on Saturdays, where they talk about, new releases and their picks for the week and so forth. So please consider checking out those episodes. And again, listeners, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Until next time, guys, aloha.
There's a voice on the line from across the sea, Jason from Hawaii checking in with Clee. Sunshine, surfing, stories to spare, but he's diving into comics anywhere he can stare. With a swipe of the screen and a tap of the thumb, he's reading every issue from the golden to the modern runs. Digital stacks higher than the eye and sky. He's got both apps open, double reading on the fly. Jason from Hawaii, he's infinite, he's unlit. Marvel doesn't matter, he's committed. From Krypton's last son to a comics king, he's reading everything that universes bring. Jason from Hawaii, yeah, he's in it. He's living it page if you know he's never quitting it. With DC Universe Infinite, Marvel Unlimited, the man's absolutely unlimited. Hey, hey. He's surfing through Gotham, riding through Metropolis, jumping to Asgard like, yeah, I got this. Reads the weeklies, pages the classics, all from his phone. It's modern comic magic, from Crisis on Infinite Earths to Hickman's Cosmic Burns. Jason's got recommendations every time he returns. He's the digital dealer of the part that's seen, dropping hidden gems you'd never think to read. Jason from Hawaii, he's infinite, he's unlimited. DC or Marvel, doesn't matter, he's committed. From Goblin Knights to the Guardians team, he's slipping through worlds like a comic book. Jason from Hawaii, yeah, he's in it, he's living it page after page. You know he's never quitting it. With DC Universe Infinite, Marvel Unlimited, the man's unstoppable, absolutely limited. Long box you needed, no shelves to fill. He's got the multiverse sitting right there on his windowsill. Tropical breeze, palm trees, and a perfect view. But he's reading Nightwing and Moon Knight too. He's infinite, he's unlimited. East Coast, West Coast, nah, the Pacific did it. Streaming panels like he's catching a wave. Every storyline, every hero he saves. Jason from Hawaii, yeah, he's in